Once you've built and tested the salutation microservice on your local machine, it's time to deploy it to Bluemix. To do this deployment, you're going to have a Bluemix account, so if you haven't signed up for one already, you'll need to do that first. And now I'm going to take you through how to actually deploy it to Bluemix. So we're going to need a couple things installed on the command line first. You'll need the Homebrew Package Manager for Mac OS, so I already have that installed here because I'm running the help command. You can see this is some of the different commands you can run for Homebrew. And then you're also going to need the Cloud Foundry CLI as well as the Bluemix CLI. I'll post instructions for how to install each, and it's pretty straightforward, but once they are installed, you should be able to run the Bluemix CLI from terminal. The first thing we're going to need to do is actually log into our Bluemix account from the command line interface. So if we run Bluemix login and then we give it the correct path here, it'll ask us for our email. So I'll go ahead and enter that, and then our password. And finally it asks for an account. So I'll go with my Udacity account, because you can have multiple accounts associated with your Bluemix account. And then it'll pick an organization and a space. And it's done that automatically for me. Then, if you haven't already, you need to install the IBM Containers plugin for the Bluemix CLI. And I've already installed it on my machine, which is why I'm getting this prompt, so I'll just say no, I don't want to reinstall it. At this point, we've established a connection to our Bluemix account, and the next step is to build the Docker image for the runtime environment. And remember, for the runtime image, we don't need all the extra tooling. We don't need the Swift compiler, we don't need things like the LLDB debugger. We just want the executable and all its runtime dependencies. And that's why for this particular project, I provided an additional Docker file, which we're calling dockerfile-runtime. And in this Docker file, you'll notice that we're only installing a few system packages. These are just ones that we need to actually run our service. And then assuming that we've already built the salutation microservice when we were testing on our local machine, we're going to add just that executable into the container. And then as soon as the container starts, we're going to kick off the salutation microservice. So let's go ahead and build this image. And then since we're using a custom named Docker file, we'll need to pass the -f option and then the name of our Docker file. So go Docker file runtime, and we'll look for that in the current working directory. Once the runtime image is built, we need to push it to Bluemix's image registry. And this is a lot like Docker's image registry, which is kind of like Docker Hub. You can think of this as Bluemix's own Docker Hub. So to do this, we need to first get our Bluemix namespace. Looks like I need to initialize something first. Let's do that. There we go. And let's try that command again. And so our namespace, or my namespace in this case, is Jared Parks. So I'll copy that. And now we want to tag the runtime image that we've built with an additional tag that identifies it and where it will live on the Bluemix image registry. So for the docker tag command, it'll take our existing tag, followed by our new tag, which in our case is going to be registry.ng.bluemix.net, and then our namespace. So my namespace is Jared Parks. And then I'm going to call this, at least for Bluemix's image registry, the salutation runtime 2, and that's because I've already done this before and I don't want a name conflict. Once you've tagged the runtime image, you should be able to see it if you run docker images. And now we're ready to push this to Bluemix's image registry. And we can see that the push has started. Now once this image is up on Bluemix's image registry, we're just a few steps away from actually creating a container on Bluemix that's running our salutation microservice. All that's left to do is to request an IP address that we can assign to our running container. So we'll request our IP address. And if you requested an IP address before and you don't remember it, you can run the IPS command, and that should list them. And it'll also show you if a container has been assigned an IP address. So let me copy this one that we just received. And we'll want to go for Bluemix. And then we'll run our final command, which is a Bluemix run command with our IP address. And we're going to open up the default port of 80 for HTTP traffic. We'll give the container a name, and I'll call this one salutation. And then we need to specify the image that we want. And that should be it. And if you get a container ID back, which that's what we're seeing here, then it should be running. So now we're ready to test it. So let's try curling at this IP address and see if we get our random salutation back. And it may take a second here, and let's try that again, and there we go. There's our random salutation. And if we just give it a second for the container to start running, and we run our curl command, there we go. There's our first random Swift salutation, and this is our first deployed in the wild Swift microservice. That's pretty awesome. And just to double check that this is working, let's try to make a couple more requests and make sure we get, there we go. We're getting different salutations each time. Awesome.